Hello friends, welcome to my ethics GS paper 4 classes. Today we are going to understand about cognitive dissonance. But before that we'll cover a little छोटा सा एक टॉपिक है persuasion का जो हमारा बचा है. We'll cover that. But make sure आज के सेशन में आगे बढ़ने से पहले make sure that you have watched each and every previous session. Alright. So what we have covered so far. So basically attitude chapter के अंदर ही है हम अभी. Chapter number 3 हमारा attitude. और एटीट्यूड चैप्टर में चैप्टर नंबर 2 एक्चुअली हम पढ़ रहे थे परसुएजन का. सो बेसिकली व्हाट आर द डिफरेंट फैक्टर्स फॉर एटीट्यूडनल चेंज, उसमें परसुएजन को पढ़ रहे थे हम. और परसुएशन में वी स्टडीड दैट देयर आर टू अप्रोचेस टू परसुएशन. सो फर्स्ट इज द अर्ली अप्रोच, राइट, दैट इज इन रिलेशन टू द परसुएडर. सो वहां पर हम क्या पढ़ते हैं, राइट, याद होगा आप लोगों को कि परसुएडर क्या कहना चाहता है, कैसे जो है वो परसुएडर परसुएड करते हैं, राइट, क्या क्या कौन परसुएडर होगा, परसुएडर क्या कहेगा, राइट. सो वी स्टार्टेड विद हु विल बी द परसुएडर. सो हु सेज व्हाट टू whom and how. So that was the early approach. Then we went into the cognitive approach towards persuasion. So यहाँ पर हमने दो तरह की cognitive processing को समझा था, the systematic cognitive processing and the heuristic. So I hope in the previous session आपने जो है वो ये अच्छे से पढ़ा होगा, right, और कोई प्रॉब्लम आपको नहीं होगी. So cognitive approach towards persuasion में हमने समझा कि क्या है सिस्टमैटिक और क्या है ह्यूरिस्टिक प्रोसेसिंग. आई होप प्रीवियस सेशन देख लेंगे अगर आप, तो अच्छे से समझ पाएंगे. और डिटेल में अगर आप पढ़ना चाहते हैं तो आई वुड सजेस्ट सम बुक्स, कुछ मटेरियल में सजेस्ट कर सकता हूँ आपको, बट यू डू नॉट नीड टू गो इनटू दैट डिटेल बिकॉज मैंने काफ़ी अच्छे से आपको डिटेल में समझा दिया है. नाउ व्हाट वी नीड टू अंडरस्टैंड इज द डिफिकल्टीज in persuasion. While you are trying to persuade someone or while someone is trying to persuade you, what difficulties that person might face. And after that we will start with today's highlight of today's topic, that is cognitive dissonance. So एक सेशन और बचा है इस एटीट्यूड चैप्टर में. cognitive dissonance के बाद in tomorrow session we will try to understand what is hypocrisy. So first let us understand what are the difficulties in persuasion. So I hope ये previous sessions आप अच्छे से देखेंगे. इससे पहले हमने different factors पढ़े and क्या है attitudinal change, attitude change हो सकता है या नहीं. So I hope you go through all those previous sessions. So now let us start with today's topic, that is, first of all let us understand what are the difficulties in persuasion. Right. So in social psychology we can now this difficulties in persuasion हमें ज़्यादा काम आएगा केस स्टडीज़ में. इनफैक्ट एटीट्यूड एज अ टॉपिक जो है वो बहुत ज़्यादा हमारी हेल्प करेगा केस स्टडीज़ में. सो डिफ़िकल्टीज इन परसुएजन, इसके एग्जांपल्स हम केस स्टडीज़ में बहुत डिटेल में समझेंगे. राइट, बट फर्स्ट in social psychology we can say that there are 5 factors. 5 factors responsible for why persuasion fails, or why if you are trying to persuade someone you are not able to persuade them, right. So what are these 5 factors? First is reactance. Second you can say is forewarning, like before warning, forewarning. Then selective avoidance. Then you can we have covered this in previous sessions, biased assimilation. And lastly, attitude inoculation. So these are the 5 factors that we can list that are responsible for your failure while persuading someone, or when someone fails while persuading someone. ठीक है. ध्यान रखिएगा, केस स्टडीज में हमें बहुत काम आएंगे ये. सो एक एक करके सबको एक्सप्लोर करते हैं. फर्स्ट लेट अस लुक एट रिलक्टेंस, sorry, not reluctance but reactance. So one thing we need to keep in mind that nobody likes to get persuaded, right? That is how we are wired, right? If someone is trying to persuade you, someone is trying to insist something on you, and especially if they are repeatedly trying to insist something on you, that agitates you, that creates a sense of irritation in you, right? And if that attempt of persuasion is not subtle, right, one should be careful to be subtle while persuading someone. अगर आप जिसे परसुएड करने की कोशिश कर रहे हैं उन्हें इल्म हो जाए, या अगर आप रिपीटेडली सेम बात अगर बोलते रहे, उन्हें इंसिस्ट करते रहे बार बार, जबकि वो व्यक्ति आपको नेग्लेक्ट कर रहे हैं या आपको डिनाई कर रहे हैं, स्टिल आप उन्हें इंसिस्ट करते जाए. लाइक फॉर एग्जाम्पल वेरियस एड्स होती हैं, ठीक है. लाइक आप यूट्यूब चलाएंगे तो यूट्यूब प्रीमियम की एड बार बार आती जाएगी. सो आई गेस अभी तक आप लोग जो है वो इरिटेट हो चुके होंगे उससे, या और भी बहुत डिफरेंट तरह की एडवर्टीजमेंट आपको बार बार आपके डिफरेंट सोशल मीडिया प्लेटफॉर्म्स पर देखने को मिल रही होंगी. सो आई गेस कुछ तो ऐसी एडवर्टीजमेंट्स होंगी, कुछ तो ऐसे प्रोडक्ट्स होंगे, आप इरिटेट हो चुके होंगे. एक आपके मन में भावना आ गई होगी कि और सब कुछ हम कर लेंगे लेकिन इस प्रोडक्ट को नहीं यूज करेंगे, इस प्रोडक्ट को सब्सक्राइब नहीं करेंगे, इस प्रोडक्ट को कंज्यूम नहीं करेंगे. सेम कैन बी सेड अबाउट सम पर्सन. कोई पर्सन आपको बार बार इंसिस्ट कर रहा है, राइट? लेट्स से समवन इज ट्राइंग टू सेल यू समथिंग और एक्सप्रेस देयर फीलिंग्स टुवर्ड्स यू, right? And you denied that person, and you denied that I don't feel the same way about you, or I don't feel like consuming your product, right? But that person repeatedly insisting, बार बार बोल रहा है, दूसरे व्यक्ति को भी कह रहा है वो व्यक्ति कि भैया जाके इनको persuade करो. So you will get agitated, you will get a sense of irritation. आपको लगेगा कि और सब कुछ कर लेंगे हम लेकिन इस व्यक्ति की बातों में नहीं आएंगे. एक और एग्जांपल देता हूं. आप किसी दुकान में गए, you went into a shop, you want to buy a new smartphone device for yourself, right? So in that shop there are बहुत सारे ब्रांड्स के प्रोडक्ट हैं और आप पहले से थोड़ा सा मन बना कर गए हैं कि एक दो ब्रांड के लिए मन बना कर गए हैं that you will buy, right, among or between those brands आप उसमें से चूज कर लेंगे. और आपने वही शॉपकीपर को कहा भी कि भैया एक दो ब्रांड मुझे इनके डिवाइसेस दिखा दो, राइट? बट शॉपकीपर perhaps they know better, or they want to sell something जिस पर मार्जिन उनका ज़्यादा है, तो वो आपको बार बार निकाल कर दिखाएंगे भैया ये प्रोडक्ट भी देखो, ये प्रोडक्ट भी देखो, ये ज़्यादा बेटर है, ये ऐसा है, ये वैसा है, ठीक है. बड़े दुखी मन से वो आपका वाला प्रोडक्ट तो लाएंगे, बट जो वो बेचना चाहते हैं, जो वो चिपकाना चाहते हैं आपको, जिसमें मार्जिन उनका ज़्यादा बन रहा है, वो भी दिखाएंगे. एंड दिस गोज फॉर एवरी टाइप ऑफ कमोडिटी, राइट? सेल्स पर्सन जहाँ पर उनका मार्जिन ज़्यादा है उसको प्रमोट ज़्यादा करेंगे वो, या जहां पर उनका कमीशन ज्यादा बन रहा है उस प्रोडक्ट को प्रमोट ज्यादा करेंगे. एंड इफ दैट इंसिस्टेंस, इफ दैट एक्ट ऑफ इंसिस्टिंग इज नॉट सटल, इज नॉट डन टेस्टफुली, if it is blunt right on your face, that irritates you. And if it is repeated, that irritates you, that creates a sense of agitation in your mind towards that product. That sense of agitation is reactance. That sense of irritation towards anything, जिस भी प्रोडक्ट के लिए आपको बार बार इंसिस्ट किया जा रहा है, राइट? सो that is what reactance is. So that is the very first level of problem while persuading someone. That means persuasion or insisting, for that matter, if you are insisting someone something, or if you are trying to persuade someone, that should be subtle, right? That should not alarm, right? That should not alarm your potential customer, for that matter, right? जिसको भी आप, जो भी अपना आइडिया प्रोडक्ट बेचना चाह रहे हैं, जिस व्यक्ति को भी आप परसुएड करना चाह रहे हैं, या जो भी आपको परसुएड करना चाह रहे हैं, that person should be subtle about it, not too blunt, not too at your face about it. If they are insisting repeatedly, harshly, rudely, that will create a sense of irritation, right, in you, and you will not get persuaded, right? That will create a difficulty to get persuaded, right? So that is reactance. Reactance is that sense of, so that is the reaction that you have towards that reluctant insistence. So not reluctant, but consistent insistence, that imposition जो आप पर थोपा जा रहा है, आपको ऐसा लगेगा कि आप पर थोपा जा रहा है, right? So you will get that sense of irritation. That's reactance, the very first level of difficulty. The second level of difficulty while persuading someone is forewarning. If that person gets alert beforehand, you started persuading them, if they get the sense that you are trying to persuade them, so their inner defense mechanism will get alert, right? And they will try everything in their capacity to, simply they will go into systematic processing, and they will try to muster every argument, right, so that they can avoid persuasion. So second is forewarning. So it is self-explanatory, पहले से ही पता चल जाए, right? The subject becomes conscious or alert. Conscious or alert towards persuasion. Now, I'm not saying that persuasion becomes impossible, I'm saying persuasion becomes difficult. And with the increasing, जैसे जैसे हम आगे बढ़ते जाएंगे, persuasion becomes more and more difficult. These are level of difficulties. First is reactance, so you need to be subtle about it. Second is forewarning, that means catch them by surprise, right? इसका मैं example देता हूँ. Now, you guys are, perhaps many of you are in your late 20s now, right? आप अपने late 20s एज में होंगे, 26, 25, 28 तक, 29 perhaps. And especially if you are a girl child, right? And it's not only to girl child, but in many cases, especially if you are girl child, अभी तक आपके ऊपर शादी करने का प्रेशर जो है वो फैमिली से आने लग गया होगा. समटाइम्स वो सटल होगा, इनिशियली वो सटल होगा, बात बात में, हंसी मजाक में आपको बोल दिया जाएगा, ओकेजन्स पर अभी आपको बोल दिया जाएगा कि कब मंगनी कर रहे हो, कब सगाई कर रहे हो, कब शादी कर रहे हो, कब हाथ पीले कर रहे हो, ठीक है? नॉट नेसेसरली फॉर गर्ल चाइल्ड, फॉर बॉयज ऑल्सो, राइट? बॉयज के, गर्ल चाइल्ड के लिए होता ही है कि हमारी सोसाइटी में वो 24 ईयर्स के आसपास शुरू हो जाती है बातचीत, और बॉयज चाइल्ड के लिए जो है वो 28 ईयर्स के आसपास शुरू हो जाती है, ठीक है? बिफोर 30 यहाँ पर क्या प्रेशर होता है, बिफोर 30 यहाँ पर क्या प्रेशर होता है, बिफोर 25, 26, राइट? बट इफ इट इज सटल, initially this persuasion by your family will be subtle, but there will come a day when they will feel, because the generation, your parent generation and your grandparent generation, they married early on, right? This is, ये जो टाइम है ना 24 और 28 में शादी हो रही है, 30-32 में शादी हो रही है, ये प्रेजेंट जनरेशन की कंडीशन है. जो हमारी पेरेंट जनरेशन है ना, उनकी शादी 18, 19, 20, 22, 24 तक हो गई थी. So for them it is quite late. For them 28, 29 years, 30 years की अगर कोई लड़की है जिसकी शादी नहीं हो रही है, for them it is quite late. So it is quite alarming for them, and they have tried to be settled for a long time, right, towards you or toward this particular subject. But there will come a day when you will hear a voice from another room of an elder, that person will call you that XYZ come to this room, right, and आपके अंदर एक तुरंत एक भावना आ जाएगी कि ये this is not the usual pattern of things that मतलब happens around your household, right, ये कुछ अलग हो रहा है. और जब आपको अंदर से टिंगल आ गई कि मतलब perhaps this वही सेम कन्वर्सेशन होने जा रहा है. और जब आप उस कमरे में गए तो देखा तो पूरी फैमिली जो है वो एक तरह से इंटरवेंशन के लिए बैठी हुई है, राइट, एंड देन दे स्टार्ट गिविंग यू देयर ओन परसेप्शन. अब वो अपना मन खोलकर बता रहे हैं कि दैट वी थिंक व्हाट दे थिंक कि लेट हो चुके हैं आप, ऐसा है वैसा है, पर्सपेक्टिव्स ये वो, समझ रहे हैं. आई गेस आप लोगों को वो टॉक जो है वो अभी तक मिल चुका होगा, राइट. बट सिंस आपको पहले से वार्निंग मिल गई, पहले से पता चल गया कि ये बात होने जा रही है, तो नाउ दे आर नॉट कैचिंग यू बाय सरप्राइज. नाउ यू आर अलर्ट. नाउ यू विल लिसन टू देयर आर्ग्यूमेंट्स. नाउ यू विल गो इनटू सिस्टमैटिक प्रोसेसिंग and you will answer and you will try to answer each and every of their questions, right, with your utmost defense, पूरा defense. Like for example they will ask कि भैया पढ़ाई कैसे चल रही है तुम्हारी. अब अगर तुम कहोगे पढ़ाई बहुत बढ़िया चल रही है तो बोलेंगे ठीक है फिर तो शादी करते हैं, अच्छी बात है, राइट. लेकिन आप कहोगे नहीं 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 अभी तो कसर बाकी है, अभी तो 1-2 साल और लगेंगे और ऐसा है वैसा है, राइट. सो आप ऐसी आर्ग्यूमेंट्स का यूज कर. व्हाई यू आर able to make those arguments? Because you got the forewarning. So the second level difficulty to persuading someone is that they get the forewarning. So if you are trying to persuade someone, make sure that they don't get, make sure to catch them by surprise. And I don't mean this in a very मतलब harming way. You don't need to मतलब आपको किसी की प्राइवेसी को इन्वेड नहीं करना है इन ऑर्डर टू बी सरप्राइजिंग, राइट. खैर जब हम केस स्टडीज में जाएंगे ना, सो देयर विल डिस्कस दिस. वहां पर ये पॉइंट जो है हमारे सामने आएगा कि हाउ टू अवॉइड फॉर वार्निंग. नेक्स्ट इज सेलेक्टिव अवॉइडेंस. नेक्स्ट लेवल इज सेलेक्टिव अवॉइडेंस. नाउ अब ये कन्वर्सेशन, अगर ये इंटरवेंशन आपके साथ कई बार हो चुका है, राइट, सो फर्स्ट ऑफ ऑल लेट अस अंडरस्टैंड व्हाट इज सेलेक्टिव अवॉइडेंस. फिर एग्जांपल की बात करते हैं. सेलेक्टिव अवॉइडेंस इज व्हेन वी हैव हाईली पोलराइज्ड एटीट्यूड्स जब हमारे डेवलप हो जाते हैं towards any of the psychological object. When we have highly polarized attitudes, right, about anything, like in this case when you have a highly polarized attitude, polarized यानी कि it can be highly positive or it can be highly negative about any of the psychological object. So in this case जो example मैंने आपको दिया about your marriage, so you are highly polarized that you will not marry before you have made something out of yourself. So you are highly polarized about that particular attitude. So what is your attitude towards marriage? That you have an attitude that I will not marry unless I will make something out of myself, right? Then only I will marry someone, if I am going to marry. Or let's say you have a highly polarized political attitude or attitude towards someone, some XYZ, some political leader, let's say our prime minister, right? You can have a highly, or people have highly polarized attitudes towards them. They have highly positive or highly negative attitudes. So such persons, when such persons who have highly polarized and don't actually do look for yourselves. आप देखिए that What are those psychological objects जिनके लिए आपके अंदर highly polarized attitudes develop हो गए हैं, right? Because everyone faces selective avoidance. So होता क्या है इसमें? When you are highly polarized about something, and if you are presented with any of the data about that particular object, right? Any of input, या आपको ऐसी सिचुएशन में डाला जाता है जहां पर आपको उस ऑब्जेक्ट के साथ अब डील करना है. लाइक फॉर एग्जाम्पल, you are highly polarized towards some ideology, towards some political leader, right? And you are scrolling through news channels, you are scrolling through YouTube videos, scrolling through your social media feed, and you come across a news channel, a social media platform, and YouTube channel and website whose ideology is anti or counter to the ideology of the political leader that you are highly positively polarized about. So what you will do? You will scroll up immediately. You will switch to another video. You will change the channel. So what you are doing? You're selectively avoiding it. Why you are selectively avoiding it? Because you know that there is a scope. You know that there is a scope. There is a fear in you that you know that if you listen to such sources, your attitudes might get challenged, or perhaps they can change them, or they can persuade them. Those sources can persuade you to change your attitudes, right? So to avoid instability of your attitudes, you choose to avoid that particular input, right? For that matter, वही let's say वही conversation शादी वाला फिर से हो रहा है आपके पास, तो आप कहेंगे कि क्या दादाजी, क्या दादी जी, क्या माता जी, क्या पिताजी, क्या आप ये बातें करते रहते हैं, छोड़िए सब बातें, हमें नहीं करनी. You will leave that room. You will make some sort of, फोन पे बात आई तो आप कहेंगे कि अभी बिजी हो, मैं पढ़ रहे हैं, अब ये वैसे और वैसे. You will make some sort of excuse to avoid that particular situation because you fear that it might challenge your already set attitudes. That is the level of selective avoidance, right? When you selectively avoid a particular media or a particular input term में मतलब समझ रहे हैं आप, एक बहुत जनरलाइज्ड टर्म यूज कर रहा हूं मैं, बिकॉज इनपुट किसी भी तरीके का हो सकता है. कोई व्यक्ति सामने आकर आपको बोल रहा है, ठीक है, आप टीवी पर देख रहे हैं, आप मेरी वीडियो देख रहे हैं, आप किसी न्यूज चैनल को देख रहे हैं, आप किसी सोशल मीडिया इन्फ्लुएंसर को देख रहे हैं, राइट? सो इफ यू आर डेलिबरेटली ट्राइंग टू अवॉइड समथिंग, some input, in order to avoid instability in your attitudes, because you have highly polarized attitudes about some things, and you want to avoid instability in those attitudes, and you are deliberately choosing to avoid such inputs who can challenge the stability of your attitudes, this situation is known as selective avoidance. और यहां पर बहुत डिफिकल्ट हो जाता है किसी को परसुएड करना. जब वो व्यक्ति आपकी बात सुनना ही नहीं चाहता तो आप परसुएड कैसे करेंगे? जब वो व्यक्ति आपकी बात सुन अवॉइड करता जा रहा है, नेग्लेक्ट करता जा रहा है, डिनाई करता जा रहा है, राइट? सो हियर persuading someone becomes very difficult. You will have to do something extraordinary, right? You have to create some sort of extraordinary pressure through different sources in order to change or get someone out of selective avoidance. That is very difficult. Next level is biased assimilation. Now we have studied bias dissimulation. Bias dissimulation is an acute form of selective avoidance, right? Or it's a one level up of selective avoidance. In selective avoidance, you are trying to avoid some source of information that challenges your already set attitude. In bias dissimulation, you are outright denying the authenticity of that source. Here, you are trying to avoid the source because you fear that that might challenge the stability of your attitude. And in this case, you are so set in your attitudes that you outright deny or challenge or doubt the source. Simple. The source that is trying to persuade you. The source that is trying to change your attitude. You will outright deny that. You will watch that. Like, that means if you are highly polarized about a political leader, you will watch the video, you will read the article, you will watch the reel, right, that is against that particular leader. And while watching this, you will deny the source. You will question, not question, you will reject the credibility of the source. You will doubt the credibility of source. You will challenge the credibility of the source. That is bias dissimulation. And at this level, persuading someone becomes more difficult, right? And in Indian politics, and for that matter in global politics also, every country is all of the world, the agenda of the political parties is to make sure कि उनके followers they reach to the level of bias dissimulation, right? And not just bias dissimulation, they reach the level of the next level, which is attitude inoculation. So bias dissimulation is quite difficult to penetrate, right? Next is attitude inoculation. Inoculation means vaccination. Right? It's like vaccination. Now vaccination में हम क्या करते हैं? अगर कोई भी like पोलियो है या अभी कोविड का वैक्सीन सभी को लगा पिछले कुछ सालों पहले, ऑलमोस्ट सभी को, तो वो क्या था बेसिकली? वैक्सीनेशन में किया क्या जाता है कि जो भी पैथोजन है, वायरस होते हैं ज़्यादातर केसेस में, जो वायरसेस हैं उनके डेड, मतलब उनको मारकर उनके मरे हुए पोर्शन में से थोड़ा सा हिस्सा निकाल कर, ठीक है, उसको किसी तरह सोल्यूशन बनाया जाता है उसका डेड वायरसेस का, राइट? और वो फिर हमारी बॉडी में इंजेक्ट किया जाता है और हमारे इम्यून सिस्टम को लगता है कि भैया ये तो खतरे वाली चीज़ आ गई, तो हमारा इम्यून सिस्टम उससे लड़ने को तैयार हो जाता है और लड़ता भी है। और सिंस वो डेड है तो उसको नष्ट करके वेस्टेज जो है वो बॉडी से निकाल भी देता है, राइट? लेकिन इस प्रोसेस में होता क्या है, उस फॉरेन बॉडीज के अगेंस्ट एंटीबॉडीज हमारी बॉडी में डेवलप हो जाती हैं। सो फॉर द नेक्स्ट टाइम जब जीवित वायरस अंदर, ये वायरस तो बॉडी में एंटर करके जीवित होता है, लेकिन जो इफेक्टिव है, जो एक्शन कर सकता है, ऐसा वायरस जब हमारी बॉडी में एंटर करेगा, नाउ वी आर प्रिपेयर्ड। हमारी बॉडी में ऑलरेडी जो है वो आर्म्स तैयार हैं, हथियार तैयार है हमारी बॉडी के पास उस पर्टिकुलर वायरस से लड़ने के लिए। दैट इज हाउ वैक्सीनेशन वर्क्स, राइट? एंटीबॉडीज पहले से तैयार कर दी जाती हैं, एंड दैट इज व्हाट एग्जैक्टली इज एटीट्यूड इनॉकुलेशन। एंड एटीट्यूड इनॉकुलेशन in psychology or in persuasion, it is more like brainwashing someone. Like if you are brainwashing someone, a political party, your parents, your teachers, your any sort of authority, if they are brainwashing you, there is always a possibility of counter brainwashing, right? brainwashing का counter भी तो किया जा सकता है ना, काउंटर ब्रेन वॉशिंग भी तो हो सकती है। Like for example, from Pakistan, if पाकिस्तान में जग जाहिर है, ये बात पूरी दुनिया को पता है दैट दे होस्ट, और वो अपने देश में जो है वो पनाह देते हैं बहुत सारी टेररिस्ट ऑर्गेनाइजेशंस को, राइट। और वो टेररिस्ट ऑर्गेनाइजेशंस पाकिस्तान की अपनी डीप स्टेट मशीनरी के साथ काम कर रही हैं, और वो छोटे इनोसेंट 8-10 साल 12 साल के बच्चों को ग्रूम करना शुरू करती हैं छोटी उम्र से ही, उनका ब्रेन वॉश करना शुरू करती हैं, उन्हें बताती हैं कि तुम जो है वो क्या हो, अपने रसूल के रास्ते पर चलो, तुम कुरान के रास्ते पर चलो, राइट। भारत के लोग जो है वो क्या हैं, भारत के लोग काफिर हैं, काफिरों के खिलाफ तुम्हें जिहाद करना है, जिहाद करने से तुम्हें जन्नत मिलेगी, जन्नत में तुम्हें 72 हूरें मिलेंगी, शराब और शहद की वहाँ नदियाँ बहती हैं। तो एक प्रॉमिस लैंड उन्हें प्रॉमिस कर देते हैं वो, राइट, दैट आफ्टर डेथ दे विल गेट जन्नत। And in this life, what their duty as a Musliman is to kill the kafirs, right? Because kafirs are bad and they are bad for Islam. So इस तरह का कुछ ब्रेन वॉश करते हैं मोटा मोटा। अब ऐसा व्यक्ति अगर भारत पहुंचे किसी तरह बॉर्डर पार कर, किसी तरह क्या, बहुत ही पहले तो बहुत आसान था, और अब आसान कहना भी ठीक नहीं रहेगा, खैर किसी तरह वो बॉर्डर पास करके पहुंच जाते हैं। कभी किसी दिन बॉर्डर्स पर बात करेंगे इंडिया के, सो देयर विल गो इनटू डिटेल्स, ऐसे मतलब आधी कच्ची कमेंट करना ठीक नहीं रहेगा। सो दैट पर्सन लेट्स से एंटर्स इनटू इंडियन टेरिटरी, और उसका उस टीम का एक व्यक्ति ने, उनकी टीम का जो है वो प्रोजेक्ट है कुछ, उनको असाइनमेंट देकर भेजा गया कि 15-20-30 दिन बाद इनको आपको ये जो है एक्टिविटी कैरी आउट करनी है, तब तक आप इस एरियाज में जाओगे, यहाँ से सामान इकट्ठा करोगे। सो दैट पर्सन इज रोमिंग अराउंड इन इंडिया एंड दैट पर्सन इज चैटिंग एंड कन्वर्सेटिंग विद हिंदूज एंड नॉन हिंदूज अलाइक। और यहाँ आकर वो देख रहा है, वहाँ तो सिखाया गया था कि मुसलमान भारत में बहुत खतरे में, बहुत दब कर रहता है, और यहाँ आकर देख रहे हैं तो हिंदू मुस्लिम जो है वो मुस्लिम्स रिलेटिवली बहुत बेटर पोजीशन में, पाकिस्तान से अच्छी कंडीशन में रह रहे हैं, और जो उन्हें ब्रेन वॉश किया गया है वैसा तो है ही नहीं भारत में, यहां आके उन्हें ऐसा देखने को मिल रहा है, राइट। नाउ अब ये चीज, अब जब वो ब्रेन वॉश्ड बच्चा ही है वो, इनफैक्ट ठीक है इनोसेंट है, और उनके दिमाग को तो प्रोग्राम कर दिया गया, अपनी सोच ही नहीं है उनके अंदर, राइट। नाउ व्हेन दे इंटरेक्ट विद इंडियंस, हो सकता है कि उनका ब्रेन वॉश जो है वो काउंटर ब्रेन वॉशिंग शुरू हो जाए, ठीक है, उनके अंदर सवाल मन में उठने शुरू हो जाए कि जो हम जानते हैं समझते हैं वो तो गलत है। तो ये बात ऑलरेडी वो लोग जानते हैं, टेररिस्ट सेल्स जानते हैं। सो व्हाट दे प्रिपेयर देयर, जो भी उनके एसेट्स होते हैं वो उनको प्रिपेयर करते हैं फॉर काउंटर ब्रेन वॉशिंग। वो उनको बताकर भेजते हैं कि वहां जाके लोग तुम्हें ऐसी बात बोलेंगे, राइट। लेकिन वहां पर लोग इतने ज्यादा डरते हैं हुकूमत से उनकी कि तुम्हें वो मन की बात, किसी भी हालत में तुम्हें वो मन की बात बताएंगे ही नहीं, हमेशा वो पॉजिटिव बातें ही बताएंगे, इतने ज्यादा डरे हुए हैं। तो अब जब वो टेररिस्ट भारत पहुंचता है और जाकर भारतीयों से बात करता है और भारतीय उसको पॉजिटिव बातें बताते हैं, अपनी आइडेंटिटी नहीं रिवील करता कि वो टेररिस्ट है, वो आम इंसान बनकर बात करता है उनसे, राइट। और जब वो पॉजिटिव बातें बताते हैं तो उसके मन में क्या आता है कि हाँ ये तो सही हमें कहकर बताया भेजा गया था, यहां पर तो ये बहुत डरे हुए हैं और ये तो झूठ बोल रहे हैं। सो दिस इज व्हाट एटीट्यूड इनॉक्यूलेशन, पहले से वैक्सीन लगाकर भेजा है उन्हें, राइट। एंड दिस एटीट्यूड इनॉक्यूलेशन, ये तो मैंने टेररिस्ट के लेवल पर बोला, ये घर पर चल रहा है एटीट्यूड इनॉक्यूलेशन, राइट। वाइफ्स एंड मदर्स में चल रहा है ये। इफ wives and mothers, right, like for example if you are wife of someone, or if someone is your wife, right, and आप एक ट्रेडिशनल हाउस होल्ड में रह रहे हैं, इंडियन हाउस होल्ड में, जिसमें मदर इन लॉ एंड फादर इन लॉ साथ में रह रहे हैं आपके, राइट। सो नाउ द वाइफ विल ट्राई टू ब्रेन वॉश द हस्बैंड एंड द मदर विल ट्राई टू काउंटर ब्रेन वॉश एंड वाइस वर्सा। सेम गोज विद योर पेरेंट्स एंड योर फ्रेंड्स, right, same goes with your teachers in the outside world. So attitude inoculation is a problem for persuasion. If someone is already vaccinated, it becomes difficult to infect them with your ideas, so to say, right? So that's attitude inoculation. So these are the 5 points, 5 level of difficulties in persuasion that you need to understand, and they will play well when we will do the case studies. वहाँ हमें बहुत ज़्यादा काम आएंगे ये, ठीक है. Now let us move to the highlight of today's session, that is cognitive dissonance. Cognitive dissonance. So now I hope आप लोगों को याद होगा what cognitive means. The process of knowing something is cognition, na? Right? The process of knowing is cognition, and knowing is cognitive, and that function is cognitive function, right? The process of knowing, or that function is cognitive function. But what about dissonance? What is dissonance? So dissonance is exactly opposite to resonance. And when two things resonate, when their vibrations, they sync, they match. When the vibes match, people resonate. And in this case, when the attitudes, they are consistent with each other, we can say that resonate with each other. And when the attitudes, they are not consistent with each other, right, we can say that they are in dissonance. So when the attitudes are, when two or multiple attitudes, they are inconsistent in a person's personality, when two or more attitudes are inconsistent with each other, right, incoherent with each other, in dissonance, right, or with incoherent with each other, they are not in resonance with each other, they are not in sync with each other, that condition is known as dissonance, right? So in attitudes there are two manner of dissonance. There are two types of dissonance. The first type is like, let's say attitude 1 and attitude 2 are not in sync with each other. They do not resonate. Right? Like for example, someone has a positive attitude towards gender equality. Right? And someone who is a vocal supporter of gender equality, right, and their behavior also, behavior की बात नहीं करते, attitude की बात कर लेते, right, their attitude is quite positive about gender equality, but at the same time they are also in supporter of the पुरानी चली आ रही, prehistoric time से चली आ रही, या prehistoric छोड़िए, ancient medieval time से चली आ रही, जो डिवीजन ऑफ लेबर की आइडियोलॉजी है, राइट, दैट मेन आर सपोज टू डू सर्टेन थिंग्स एंड वुमेन आर सपोज टू डू सर्टेन अदर थिंग्स, एंड द थर्ड जेंडर इज सपोज टू डू ऑल टुगेदर अदर थिंग्स, राइट. At the one side, that person believes in gender equality and is a vocal supporter of that, has a positive attitude toward gender equality, and the other side, that person has a positive attitude toward division of labor also, right. That person believes that men are supposed to do that men are supposed to do some particular things and women are also supposed to do some particular things. There is a clear division of labor among men, women and the third gender, right? So this situation is what, that these two attitudes are not coherent, consistent with each other. So this is a situation of dissonance. So this is the first type of dissonance, where two attitudes, they do not match, or two attitudes are not consistent with each other. Like for example, someone is चलो दूसरा एक, पहले दूसरा टाइप देख लेते हैं. Second is, there is attitude one and there is behavior one, right? That means for an attitude, for a particular attitude, the behavior do not match. So there is a gap between attitude and behavior. So I hope ये आपको याद होगा. We have understood this when we discussed attitude and behavior link. याद कीजिए वो चैप्टर एटीट्यूड एंड बिहेवियर लिंक, जिसमें हमने स्टडी किया है दैट व्हाट आर द वेरियस फैक्टर्स ड्यू टू विच समवन्स बिहेवियर इज नॉट कंसिस्टेंट विद देयर एटीट्यूड, और इफ दे आर कंसिस्टेंट, perhaps it is not that much consistent and the degrees they vary, right? So these are the two types of these are the two types of dissonances with attitude, right? And not just that, dissonances further can be of two type, और भी एक different type की classification है. While to understand cognitive, let us first understand that dissonance can further be of two type. First is incognitive and second is cognitive dissonance. So today's topic is cognitive dissonance, but there can also be an incognitive dissonance. So what is incognitive dissonance? देखिए, one thing you need to keep in mind, like I said that everyone faces selective avoidance, and perhaps for certain degree, for some degree you also face biased assimilation. And selective avoidance, biased assimilation, we all feel. And attitude inoculation तो होता ही है हमारे अंदर बचपन से ही. वो वैक्सीनेशन डाली जाती है पेरेंट्स द्वारा, देन फिर टीचर्स द्वारा, हमारे दोस्तों द्वारा, हमारे वर्क मतलब आपके बॉसेस द्वारा, ठीक है, आपके सीनियर्स द्वारा, हमारी गवर्नमेंट द्वारा, राइट, इंटरनेशनल फॉरम्स द्वारा, सोशल मीडिया द्वारा, सॉफ्ट पावर में मूवीज जो चल रही हैं, ठीक है, टीवी सीरीज चल रही है, ये सब एटीट्यूड इनोकुलेशन यूज कर रहे हैं, कहीं ना कहीं आपको वैक्सीन लगाने की कोशिश कर रहे हैं बचपन से ही, ठीक है. सेम गोज फॉर, वी आर with all this persuasion and propaganda, it is safe to assume that at certain levels definitely you have reached to selective avoidance for certain matters, for certain psychological objects, and perhaps for some matters you have reached to biased assimilation, right? So what about dissonance? So like we have reached to selective avoidance, or we have reached to biased assimilation, or we have been vaccinated about certain attitudes. Similarly, you also face cognitive dissonance on a daily basis, or dissonance on a daily basis, right? Everyone has the dissonance in various areas. No one can say that all their attitudes they line up perfectly. No, everyone has dissonance, right, to a certain degree. I'm not saying that all of their attitudes will be inconsistent with each other, but perhaps there will be at least one set of attitudes that will be not in sync with each other, right? And if they do not know about that dissonance, or they do not know about that inconsistency, that is known as incognitive dissonance, because they do not know, they do not have the knowledge of that. That is incognitive dissonance. And if that person has the knowledge of that dissonance, then it is cognitive dissonance. Simple as that, right? Like for example, some person who has a habit of planting trees, right, and who is a vocal advocate of planting trees and saving environment and everything, and who does this actually. It's not just their attitude, it's in their behavior. But on the eve of Diwali, they fire crackers like there is no tomorrow, right? So जितना पेड़ नहीं लगाते उससे ज़्यादा पटाखे फोड़ देते हैं वो, और let's say they burn unnecessarily fuel जलाते हैं वो unnecessarily, right? So they have positive attitudes towards both planting trees and firing crackers, right? But they do not know that these two positive attitudes of theirs are inconsistent with each other. So they have incognitive dissonance. Since they have incognitive dissonance, this do not affect them in any sense, because they are not aware of it. Why we are trying to understand cognitive dissonance? Because it is very painful, it is very stressful on us. In fact, it is the source of misery for a lot of people, because they are constantly going through cognitive dissonance, because they know that some of their attitudes they do not match. Like they want to achieve something but they are not putting enough efforts. ये बिल्कुल basic students में होता है, that they want to achieve something but they are not putting enough efforts, right? Or they want to study, like they have prepared a plan that I will study this much hours in this week or starting today, right? But at the same time they have positive attitude towards spending time with their friends, or simply laying in a fetal position on bed and scrolling through your social media feed, right? Perhaps that is the result of cognitive dissonance, because due to cognitive dissonance, it stresses you, it makes you anxious, it gets you into that depressive state. So you lie down curled in a fetal position and then you start scrolling, so because you want to avoid that stress, you want to distract yourself of that stress. So it's a vicious cycle, right? Because at one side you want to avoid that stress, and you are stressed because you are not working, and you are not working because you are stressed. So it's a vicious cycle. And a lot of problems of youth, including mine also, I'm not saying that this do not affect me, right? Everyone has these cognitive dissonance, and हमारे दुखों का एक बहुत बड़ा कारण है cognitive dissonance. ठीक है, बुद्धा ने कहा ना कि दुख है, और उससे बड़ी प्रॉब्लम यह है कि हमें पता है कि दुख है. सॉरी. सो जब आपको पता है दैट देयर इज अ डिसोनेंस, राइट, इन योर एटीट्यूड्स, एंड यू नो it is highly painful. So cognitive dissonance combinedly, it is highly, sometimes it is physically painful, because that stress, it manifests in some sort of manifestation जो बॉडी में हो जाएगा. आपके किसी तरह की बीमारी हो जाएगी, आपको कमर दर्द, कई लोगों को शोल्डर में, अपर बैक, लोअर बैक में पेन रहता है, जॉइंट पेन्स होने शुरू हो जाते हैं, लोग बीमार हो जाते हैं, स्किन प्रॉब्लम्स हो जाती है, राइट, कई तरह की प्रॉब्लम्स हो जाती है, लोग हेयर फॉल होने लग जाता है, लोगों को जनरली पेनफुल होता है और स्ट्रेसफुल होता है, राइट, बिकॉज ऑफ योर फियर्स. अब थोड़ी देर में चलो डिस्कस करते हैं इसे, व्हाई इट इज पेनफुल और स्ट्रेसफुल. फियर्स एंड डिजायर्स, ठीक है, दो कारण है, फियर्स एंड डिजायर्स, बेसिक दो कारण. सो दैट्स कॉग्निटिव डिसोनेंस, एंड everyone has dissonance of both types, incognitive as well as cognitive, and I want you to filter out your incognitive as well as cognitive dissonances, right? So as I said, what is the problem with cognitive dissonances? CD लिख रहे हैं cognitive dissonance को, क्या प्रॉब्लम है? That it is highly painful and stressful. right? Like in a public, on a public forum, on a public platform, in your social situation, you have made a claim that you have a particular attitude towards something and you behave according to that, right? But in a certain other situation, you are not behaving according to that particular attitude and someone has called you out on this. Now you are humiliated publicly. Now you are stressful. This impacts your mental health, your physical health, right? That generally makes your life miserable, right? Like, for example, a man, right, claiming to be a feminist, claiming to be a supporter of gender equality, right? But at the same time, at their homes, they are highly patriarchal in nature, right? Or let's say a man claiming to be respectful towards women and at the same time use multitudes of abusive words that includes women. This is what? This is dissonance, right? And at the moment you make that person, there can be two cases. One is that that person is aware of this, that there is a dissonance. Now मैन की जगह वुमेन भी हो सकता है, ठीक है, कोई भी व्यक्ति है, right? If that person has dissonance and if they are not aware of it, that means it is an incognitive dissonance. As far as it is incognitive dissonance, it will not be painful or stressful on them because they are not aware of it. But let's say someone who is highly respected in their community, right, because of their high regard and respect for women, and if someone hurt them using abusive languages, और आप जाकर उन्हें कहते हैं कि रिस्पेक्टफुली जाकर कहते हैं कि जनाब हम तो एक्सपेक्ट ही नहीं कर रहे थे कि आप इस तरह की भाषा या लहजे का इस्तेमाल करते होंगे, so that will humiliate that person, na, at some degree, because now they have to look out for their image. Now they become conscious about their image. Now they know that they have a certain level of certain image in the society. So in society, image is something, right? हमें बचपन से सिखाया गया है या कई जगह पर हमने सीखा that image is very superficial and we must not care about this or that, but it is a highly pragmatic in our society. Image बहुत ज़्यादा pragmatic चीज़ है. There was a time, perhaps in the early of the 20th century, where people were not concerned about their image, yet people used to follow them, right? But in today's time, it is being emotionally intelligent to care about your image. It is pragmatic to care about your image, right? And by caring about your image and practicing, if you want to project an image of a genuine personality, a good personality, obviously you will do what? You will try to work on yourself, you will try to do better, right? Like another example, if in a marriage both partners are working professionals, right? And traditionally in Indian society, women were supposed to be the homemakers, right? Now both the partners are professional workers and in their professional spheres, they project an image of being a person in support of gender equality, right? But as soon as they reach home, they know that the patriarch will not do anything and the burden of the household work will fall on the woman, the homemaker, right? So that's dissonance, ठीक है? And that person, अब यहाँ पर आप ये नहीं कह सकते that person who is a working professional, that do not know that a couple who are both working professional, they are supposed to help each other, right, in household chores or works, right? And if that person is not helping out his let's say partner, so that person will get cognitive dissonance, and that cognitive dissonance will be painful on them, right? If that person is बिल्कुल ढीठ है, बेशरम है, तब तो उसको बताकर टोक कर जो है वो cognitive dissonance दिया जा सकता है. If that person is ignorant, right, तो उनको बार बार रिमाइंड कराकर cognitive dissonance दिया जा सकता है. बट अगर इग्नोरेंट नहीं है तो जब भी वो देखेंगे कि खुद भी थके आ रहे हैं बट बीवी भी थकी आ रही है और काम कर रही है फिर भी, so they will feel that guilt, they will feel that stress, and if they do something about it they will feel good, and if they do not do something about it, it will manifest in some form or some eventually it manifests itself in anger. But let us not go into that direction, right? So cognitive dissonance is highly painful, and every one of us want to get out of cognitive dissonance, right? We are in many cases we are not aware of our dissonances, so we are in cognitive dissonance, so we are not stressed about it. But in many cases we are aware of our dissonances or our conflicting attitudes and our conflicting behaviors, for that matter, our conflicting actions, right? And if we not do something about it, it is highly stressful on us, right? Now let us look for why cognitive dissonance. What are the reasons of cognitive dissonance, right? So now मैंने आपको क्या कहा, that everyone want to get out of cognitive dissonances, right? No one likes that internal conflict in them that gives them a perpetual feeling of guilt, and that guilt leads to stress, that stress leads to anger, and that anger leads to questionable choices, right? In many cases. So everyone wants, but in normal conditions everyone wants a link, a clear link between their attitude and behavior. Everyone wants that their attitudes, different attitudes should be in line, should be consistent, and their attitudes and behavior should also be consistent with each other, so that they do not catch the cognitive dissonance. But we know that what are the different reasons due to which the gap increases between attitude and behavior, because of various situations, because of, let's say, your aspirations, your personalities, your desires, your fears, your values, the weakness of attitudes. We have covered this in details when we covered attitude and behavioral link, right? So there are many reasons for us having a gap between our attitude and behavior. But what are the reasons for cognitive dissonance? Can we list those reasons? Yes, we can list one. So first reason we can say is fear of society. Fear and desires तो है ही, ठीक है. पहला है fear of society, because आपने सोसाइटी में क्लेम किया होता है something, right? And your actions and your attitudes are, if they are not consistent with your claims, right, and yet, and at the same time you do not have to courage to face the society, right? Because according to society you have developed an attitude. Like for example, if you are living in a highly patriarchal society, so you have developed an attitude of being a patriarch in the public life, right? अपने मित्रों के सामने, this goes for both males and females, this goes for all genders, right? अपने social circle में आप highly patriarchy को follow कर रहे हैं, right? But अपने personal space में you are not so much, you are not convinced with that whole idea of patriarchy, right? But with the fear of society you are not able to challenge those norms, those customs, right? So you live in constant conflict. So this is common with young ladies, young girls, right? और लड़कों में भी है ही, but लड़कियों में ज़्यादा common है ये, because they in public sphere many times they have to follow patriarchy, but in their insides they are not in support of patriarchy. So internally they are in constant conflict with themselves only. That gives them cognitive dissonance that is highly stressful and painful for them, right? Secondly is our aspirations and desires, right? Fears and aspirations, your fears and desires. And generally when we have inconsistency in someone's personality, if you observe inconsistency in someone's personality, the culprits are these two: fears and desires. That person's desires of being something or someone, that is, or having some sort of attitude about some, देखो मैं अभी आपको एग्जांपल नहीं दे रहा, आई वांट दैट कि आप अपनी लाइफ से छांटें एग्जांपल्स, आप अपनी लाइफ में ढूंढे that what are your desires which challenge the norms of society. Because of those desires you cannot project, और आप express नहीं कर सकते उन desires को. You have particular attitudes about something, like for example in adolescent age, जब puberty hit करते हैं बच्चे तो बहुत rebellious हो जाते हैं, ठीक है? बहुत उनको बहुत सारी चीज़ें, नई नई चीज़ें पता करनी होती हैं और नई नई एक्सपेरिमेंट्स करने होते हैं उन्हें, ठीक है? नए नए प्रोडक्ट्स, नए नए चीज़ों को कंज्यूम करने का मन करता है, खाने का मन करता है, पीने का मन करता है, ठीक है? टॉयज से खेलने का मन करता है, डिफरेंट टाइप के, लेकिन अपनी डिजायर्स को वो एक्सप्रेस नहीं कर पाते. उनका पॉजिटिव एटीट्यूड होता है किसी के प्रति, बट दे नो दैट देयर पेरेंट्स, देयर फ्रेंड्स, देयर सर्कल विल नॉट अलाउ दिस. So they face cognitive dissonance, right? Third is ignorance, right? So first of all is someone who do not know about the inconsistency, so that's in cognitive dissonance, right? And second is someone know about, पहला क्या है cognitive dissonance का रीजन, या dissonance का रीजन है for that matter, someone do not know about the inconsistency of their, they are ignorant about the inconsistency in their attitudes, right? And second is, if they are aware of the inconsistency yet they do not want to, they are ignorant to their responsibilities, or they are ignorant to their own आप कह सकते हैं function or own role in that particular social situation. Like मैंने आपको बताया ना, that husband who is a working professional, his wife is also a working professional, they both work all day, they have returned home in evening, and now only the woman is working in the household. Woman is now in charge of the preparing food or washing the dishes and tidying up the whole house, and the man, that person knows that this is inconsistent with his attitude, but he is ignorant about it. So ignorance, there is a phrase that ignorance is bliss, but if you want to become a civil servant, ignorance is not, it's not going to be bliss for you, because if you are ignorant, this will not look good for your career, right, on your track record. If you want to become a because becoming a civil servant is the first step, right? Reaching to the heights of what that service can offer you, reaching to those heights should be your aim, and you need to think according to that, right? Clearing the civil service examination is the first step. For that matter, clearing any of the examination is the first step, or for that matter acquiring any of the position or starting your own business, that's the first step, right? Your aim, your ambition, there is nothing bad in having ambition, right? Your ambition should be reaching the highest levels, because if you are at the highest level and if you know and have the experience of how to do something right and how to do good things, right? So you will be able to put yourself to good use. So ignorance is something that you cannot afford. Next is, so these are the 3 points. You can say that what are the reasons for cognitive dissonance. Now that we have understanding of what is cognitive, what is dissonance, what is in cognitive dissonance, what are the reasons behind cognitive dissonance. Now let us understand how to reduce cognitive dissonance, right? So there are 2 solutions to reduce cognitive dissonance. One is a direct solution and other is a indirect solution. You can directly reduce your cognitive dissonance and other is indirectly reducing the cognitive dissonance. First of all, let us look at the direct solution to reduce cognitive dissonance. So what is the problem here? That the attitudes are not consistent, or attitude and behavior are not consistent. So what is the direct solution be? You need to change, you need to make changes. You need to change either the attitude or you need to change either the behavior, right? Though changing both the attitudes and behaviors are not very easy, but between these two, changing attitudes is rather easy than changing behavior, right? Like for example, you have an attitude of being environment friendly, or let's say you have an attitude of being kind to animals, or you like animals, right? But you wear leather belts, you wear leather boots, you wear leather jackets, you use fur coats, you have fur hats, right? And not just that, एनिमल बेस्ड प्रोडक्ट्स बहुत सारे होते हैं, एनिमल्स पर रिसर्च की गई तब जाकर ये डिफरेंट मेडिसिन या मेडिसिन प्रोसीजर्स बने हैं, मेडिसिनल प्रोसीजर्स बने हैं, या डिफरेंट तरह की दवाइयाँ बनी हैं या डिफरेंट प्रोसीजर्स बने हैं, एनिमल्स पर रिसर्च किया गया पहले. साइकोलॉजी को समझने के लिए, ह्यूमन साइकोलॉजी को समझने के लिए बहुत ज़्यादा एनिमल्स पर रिसर्च की गई है, राइट? So at one side you have an attitude, positive attitude towards the animal, you are kind to animals, or let's say you are kind to environment, you plant a lot of trees like I have given an example, and in your behavior you are firing crackers like there is no tomorrow. So your attitudes and behaviors are not sync with each other, they are inconsistent with each other. So you will and if you are ignorant to this, if you do not have the knowledge of this, you will be fine. But once in your public life, if someone called you out, if someone made you understand that your attitudes are not consistent with each other, you will get cognitive dissonance, and that will be highly painful for you. बहुत मुश्किल हो जाएगा आपको डाइजेस्ट करना, right? So now what you can do? So now either you can change your attitude or change your behavior, right? Like for example, you can change your attitude, like if you are using animal based products, अब medicine खाना तो छोड़ नहीं सकते, so you will change the attitude that if it is only, I will use animal based products if it is only necessary, right? जब जीवन पर बात आ जाएगी तभी मैं एनिमल बेस्ड प्रोडक्ट यूज करूंगा, राइट? और मैं एक साइड फायर क्रैकर्स जला रहा हूं, मैं एक साइड एसी का यूज कर रहा हूं, मैं एक साइड गैस मतलब पेट्रोल डीजल बहुत ज्यादा जला रहा हूं, राइट? तो मेरी कोशिश ये रहेगी कि मैं तभी ये सभी काम करूं जब बहुत ज्यादा ही नेसेसरी हो. Otherwise I'll use public commutes, otherwise I will use bicycle, or I'll walk to that particular place. So you can change either your attitude or your behavior. You can become vegan, right? You can only use products which are not developed by harming any animal, which is very difficult in present time, right? So that is the very first direct solution that you can make changes. Second direct solution is that you gather more information, right? Someone has given you cognitive dissonance, you gather more information, you go into systematic processing, right? And you justify, because you cannot change your attitudes, it is very difficult because they are part of your lifestyle, your attitudes and behaviors, they are part of your personality. It is very difficult to change them. So what you will do, you will gather more information and you will try to justify, you can try to justify your dissonance, right? You can try to justify in what manner? That I understand that my attitudes are not consistent, but they are not consistent not out of my ignorance, but out of my necessities. It is necessary, right, for me to यूज, क्योंकि मेडिसिन तो खानी ही पड़ेगी. अब साल में एक बार मेडिसिन खा रहे हैं और तुम आकर ऐसे डिसोनेंस गिल्ट दे रहे हैं, हमें स्ट्रेस दे रहे हो, ये नहीं चलेगा ना, राइट? अब दवाई खानी नहीं छोड़ सकते हैं, या तो दवाई ऐसी हो जो कि एनिमल्स को नहीं हार्म करती हो, तो वो इन्फॉर्मेशन गैदर करी कि ऐसी दवाइयाँ मिले, ऐसे प्रोडक्ट्स मिले, राइट, जो हार्म नहीं करते. एंड थर्डली यू कैन ट्रिवलाइज, राइट, ट्रिवलाइजेशन ऑफ डिसोनेंस, राइट? कोई आपके घर में आकर कह रहा है कि तुम इतना इन्वायरमेंट करते हो और घर पे एसी चलाकर बैठते हो, गाड़ी से जाते हो, राइट, और मतलब तुम पोल्यूट कर रहे हो, कार्बन फुटप्रिंट तुम्हारा बहुत ज्यादा है. तो ऐसे में तुम कहोगे कि भैया ये सब बातें हमें मत बताओ, ठीक है, राइट? यू विल ट्रिवलाइज द डिसोनेंस, राइट? आप डिसोनेंस को इतनी इंपॉर्टेंस ही नहीं देंगे that dissonance stresses you, because you understand that whatever you are doing, you have the maturity to understand that whatever you are doing is out of necessity, right? And you are confident in your decisions, and and you understand that you have dissonance, and you are mature enough not that affect you. So that is trivial बना दिया, trivialization of dissonance is the third direct solution. Second is gathering more information, and first is making actual changes. Then there are indirect solutions. What those might be? So first indirect solution is self affirmation, राइट? खुद की तारीफ करना, ऐसा करना कुछ फोकसिंग ऑन योर ओन गुडनेस, फोकसिंग ऑन योर ओन गुडविल्स, राइट? लाइक फॉर एग्जाम्पल, इफ यू हैव टू यूज एयर कंडीशनर्स, इफ यू हैव टू बर्न फ्यूल, राइट, if you have a higher carbon footprint, so to do your part, what you will do? You will plant more trees, right? You will promote afforestation, you will make people aware about deforestation, right? You will work on your own, मतलब अपने साइड से आप जितना कर सकते हैं करेंगे for preserving environment, right? That's self-affirmation that you can do so that you don't feel cognitive dissonance or you reduce cognitive dissonance, because cognitive dissonance, as I told you, is a leading factor behind stress, especially in youth, right? Because it gives you cognitive dissonance, it gives you guilt, and guilt eats a person. गिल्ट बहुत खतरनाक चीज है. हमारी फैमिली बचपन से हमें गिल्ट ट्रिप में रखती है, हमारे पार्टनर्स हमें गिल्ट ट्रिप में रखते हैं, हमारे सीनियर्स हमें गिल्ट ट्रिप में रखते हैं, हमारे जूनियर्स हमें गिल्ट ट्रिप में रखते हैं, हमारी गवर्नमेंट्स, हमारा रिलीजन, हमारी कम्युनिटीज, हमारे सोशल ग्रुप्स, गिल्ट का हर जगह यूज हो रहा है. और वो गिल्ट क्यों है? बिकॉज ऑफ द इनकंसिस्टेंसी ऑफ एटीट्यूड. दैट इज वन ऑफ द रीजन ऑफ दैट गिल्ट, राइट? Second indirect solution is outright avoiding dissonance. Selective avoidance, avoiding or ignoring. Right? वो जो dissonance है, वो जो incoherency है, उसको avoid कर रहे हैं. Right? Because there will be some people in your life जो कि कभी ना कभी दिन में एक आधी बार, हफ्ते 10 दिन में, महीने में एक आधी बार आपको आकर आपको याद दिला जाएंगे आपकी डिसोनेंस को, आपको पोक कर जाएंगे. या फॉर दैट मैटर अभी जो सेलेक्टिव अवॉइडेंस की बात करी मैंने, राइट, दैट परहैप्स देयर विल बी सम सॉर्ट ऑफ मीडिया आउटलेट दैट कैन destabilize your attitude. So what you will do? You will try to avoid that altogether. You will go into the mode of selective avoidance. So selective avoidance is another way of avoiding or reducing dissonance, right? And the third is in extreme cases, and it is when it is used when it is prescribed by a professional, is to intoxicate yourself. Only if it is prescribed by a healthcare professional to de-stress yourself, to decompress yourself, the use of alcohol. So now do you understand? A lot of alcoholics, they are actually going through dissonance, cognitive dissonance, right? Not just intoxicating yourself by alcohol, by any other form of drugs, narcotic drugs. People are, and not just that, any other form of, let's say, distractions. There are a lot of type of distraction. People watching reels whole day, people watching TV series, movies, filming themselves, creating reels, different type of distractions, just to avoid cognitive dissonance, just to avoid that stress. So as I told you, this cognitive dissonance, this creates a feeling of guilt, feeling of stress, feeling of pain, right? That makes you anxious, that makes you stressed, and then you try to intoxicate yourself, you try to drug yourself, you try to distract yourself, and that hampers your life, right? So you are stressed because you are not doing right by your life or acting accordingly, and you are not acting accordingly, you are stressed, and you are stressed, you are not so it's a vicious cycle, right? So many a times people find themselves in this vicious cycle, and they find themselves intoxicating. So I always say, always I say that avoid intoxicating yourselves in any form, and try to ढूंढने की कोशिश कीजिए कि कहाँ आप अपने आप को इंटॉक्सिकेट कर रहे हैं. नॉट जस्ट विद दीज साइकोट्रोपिक substances, but also other type of, like food is type of an intoxicant if not consumed properly. Stress eating, like in my case, why I'm so fat? Because I stress eat, right? There are other reasons also regarding my metabolism, but stress eating is a leading factor, right? So these are the indirect solutions, but I highly recommend not to follow this solution unless it is recommended by a professional, healthcare professional. right? But people do this. People do this in direct solution to avoid their cognitive dissonance. Then lastly, let us understand what is the relationship here, dissonance and attitudinal change. Dissonance and attitudinal change, right? So now if you want to change someone's attitude, you can use dissonance as a tool, right? To change someone's attitude, you can use dissonance as a tool, right? Like I have given you an example. Like if someone, a man who says that he is respectful, he has an utmost respect for the other genders, right? So in their attitude and also in their behaviors in public sphere, it is evident that that person is respectful towards all genders. But someone saw them, heard them using abusive languages, right? और उनको जाकर बोला गया कि भैया हमें तो लगा था कि आप ऐसा भाषा का प्रयोग कर ही नहीं सकते, right? So if that person is not aware of their dissonance, to change their attitude, you make them aware of this dissonance. You make them aware that आप ऐसी भाषा का प्रयोग करें, ऐसी भाषा का प्रयोग आप पर सूट नहीं करता है, ना करें. So that person will become aware of their dissonance and person will become aware of their images, right? And then gradually they will become more careful to use rather standard language or rather clean language, right? Now this changing attitude, using dissonance to change attitude in psychology, in social psychology especially, it is known as induced compliance. This is known as induced compliance. याद रखिएगा वर्ड ये, right? Using dissonance to change someone's attitude is known as induced compliance. यानी कि आप comply करवा रहे हैं, आप बात मनवा रहे हैं किसी व्यक्ति को, अपनी बात मनवा रहे हैं, उनका एटीट्यूड चेंज कर रहे हैं, उनको कंप्लाई करवा रहे हैं, आप इंड्यूस कर रहे हैं वो कंप्लायंस उनके अंदर बाय यूजिंग डिसोनेंस एज अ टूल. और यू कैन अवॉर्ड समवन लाइक दैट सेम पर्सन. स्कूल में हमारे यहाँ यूज किया जाता था ये, ठीक है? बहुत जो शरारती बच्चे होते हैं तालियां बजवा रहे हैं उनके लिए, ये है देखिए कितनी शरारत करते हैं, इन्होंने शीशा फोड़ दिया, पंखे पे चढ़े बैठे थे, पंखे की एक पंखड़ी उतार दी इन्होंने, वाह कमाल कर दिया इन्होंने. तो ठीक है, हमारे टीचर्स यूज किया, अगर हमें पता नहीं था उस समय कि हमारे टीचर्स जो है वो इंड्यूस्ड कंप्लायंस का यूज कर रहे हैं, राइट? सो बेसिकली दे आर अवॉर्डिंग, एंड एक्चुअली दे आर अवॉर्डिंग दोज मिस्चीवियस स्टूडेंट्स इंक्लूडिंग माई सेल्फ, एंड वी वर नॉट अवेयर एंड वी वर वेरी हैप्पी. यस, बहुत बढ़िया करा है हमने तो, राइट? बट जब धीरे धीरे हमें समझ आया कि बच्चे ताली बजा रहे हैं, हंस भी रहे, ठीक है, तो हमें समझ आया, हमें वो ह्यूमिलिएशन फील हुआ. सो देन वी अंडरस्टैंड कि नहीं, हमने कुछ गलत किया है, right? So that is induced compliance. Then we started complying with the set norms, or we changed our attitude and we changed our behaviors. So that is how dissonance is used for attitudinal change, right? So induced dissonance or induced compliance changes attitudes. By induced compliance we can change attitudes, right? So I hope this much is enough for today's session. In next session, in tomorrow's session, we shall discuss hypocrisy. So make sure that you go through all the previous sessions. The questions that I will provide you on the Telegram group, make sure that you write answers to those and send me the answers, right? Make sure that you go through all the previous sessions. Thank you for watching this one. मिलेंगे next class में, तब तक अपना ध्यान रखिए आप लोग. Take care. Have a nice day.